Everyone, please welcome Fran Drescher.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Hi, everyone.
Welcome to Google.
Thank you.
So we're going to talk about Cancer Schmancer a little bit. So you wrote a book on this, and you then started an entire movement in 2007. I know we just saw the video, but can you give us a little bit of a background of what happened to you? And
Well, it took me 2 years and 8 doctors to get a proper diagnosis of uterine cancer. I sort of slipped through the cracks because I didn't fit the profile of who gets it, which is usually postmenopausal women or obese women, which I was neither. But 1 out of 4 women are young and thin. So it seems like they should have ruled that out before treating me for the more benign possibility, which was a perimenopausal condition that I didn't have. And I think that, I started to put the puzzle pieces together as I wrote the book and then went on my book tour and met tens of thousands of people throughout the nation. And it seems that doctors are bludgeoned by big business health insurance to go the least expensive route of diagnostic testing. So most of them will subscribe to the philosophy, if you hear hooves galloping, don't look for zebra, it's probably a horse. But if you happen to be a zebra, then you're going to slip through the cracks and potentially have to pay a serious consequence. Now, particularly with women's gynecologic cancer, at its earliest and most curable stage, which I call the whisper stage, it's often misdiagnosed for either perimenopause, which I had, but I was lucky, I had a slow-growing cancer, so even after 2 years and 8 doctors, I was still in stage 1, but had I had, God forbid, ovarian cancer, which is far more aggressive and often misdiagnosed for irritable bowel syndrome, I probably wouldn't be talking to you today because 80% of those women are diagnosed in the late stages and 70% of them will die. So, I started to think that we need to reinvent the wheel here. We need to, first of all, why isn't everybody being diagnosed in stage 1? The reason why we lose loved ones to cancer is almost always due to late stage diagnosis. And so that was the cornerstone of the Cancer Schmancer movement. Catch it on arrival, 95% survival. So that meant transforming patients into medical consumers, knowing what the early warning whispers are of the cancers that may affect you, and the tests that are available, because all too often they're not even on the menu at the doctor's office. And then that kind of morphed into, well, why are we getting cancer in the first place? Let's not get cancer at all. How's that for a cure? So causation became an obsession of the Cancer Schmancer movement because, we're very reductionist in our medical thinking in Western medicine. So we kind of look at the sick part of the body and try and fix that, and very rarely ask, why did the body get dis-ease in the first place? And cancer is the end stage of a long history of low-level inflammation. So we have to start looking at what's causing the inflammation way before it turns into a cancer. Identify and eliminate. So Cancer Schmancer came up with a very progressive program called Detox Your Home, because the home is the most toxic place that we spend the most time in, and ironically have the most control over. So we ask you, as it said in that video, take the check, choose, and change challenge. Check labels, choose healthy, organic, eco-friendly products, and become the change the world so desperately needs. Now, with that particular video, that's targeting teens and tweens, because that is the first generation predicted to not live as long as their parents in U.S. history. And we don't wish to make that a self-fulfilling prophecy. So that's a demographic that doesn't vote, doesn't pay taxes, and doesn't wield a lot of influence in Washington. But they are a multi-billion-dollar spending demographic. And in that regard, they wield a lot of influence if we can change them from being mindless consumers to mindful consumers. And if everybody stopped drinking cola today, they would stop making it tomorrow that fast. It wouldn't matter who was in the White House or what regulation was legislated. It wouldn't matter because the bottom line is the bottom line. So the systemic malignancy of all the woes of the world is greed. And who fuels that greed? We do, with our purchasing, our mindless spending, waiting for, government or the FDA to tell us it's okay or it's not okay. That's never going to happen. You have to start thinking for yourself. You have to start changing the way you live. Start thinking about what you're putting in your mouth, all the food you eat. If you're eating industrial farm foods, you're just asking for inflammation and all kinds of dis-ease. You are what you eat, and you are what you're eating is eating. So, if you're eating at some fast food place that's not organic, then, you're eating an animal that's living a Dickensian life, that's being fed GMO grain that's not natural for their diet, that's living in absolute abject misery. And they're getting hormones, and they're getting antibiotics. That's absolutely disgusting. And that's part of the reason why we're getting sick. And we're also not thinking about the level of EMFs that we're exposing ourselves to, which is we are in perfect harmony with the Earth's energy. We are of this Earth. We are of this planet. But we're in complete disharmony with EMFs. And electromagnetic fields is a terrible thing. It discombobulates our energy field and creates dis-ease in our body. So anyone that's not actively trying to protect themselves from 5G coming into their community is, unconscious to what that really means for life on this planet. So I think that we have to use our common sense. We have to dial everything back to a simpler kind of eating, a simpler kind of living, and reconnect back to nature and pivot our thinking from feeling like we are the master of the universe instead of the shepherds, because that's really what our job should be on this planet, and anything else is a complete interference and unsustainable.
Well, thank you. That was a great answer to question one. We got to laugh early on. Some people would retreat and say, this is a really private matter to me. You became very public about it. What was the reward for being so public about this?
It's turning pain into purpose is very healing. And somehow it also makes sense out of the senseless. Because when on one random Tuesday afternoon, life bites you on the ass and life as you knew it changes forever, and what you thought was going to be can never be, ever. That's done. You're going to kick and scream and say, why me, Lord? But at some point, you're going to have to let go of what you thought was going to be and play the hand that's been dealt you, and play it as elegantly and courageously as you possibly can. That's the only way to climb yourself out of the bitterness of this wasn't supposed to happen and turn it into, okay, I'm still here, and maybe there's a reason why this happened. Maybe I can turn this into something that can not only enrich my life, but help other people too. And I feel like I got famous, I got cancer, and I lived to talk about it. So I'm talking, and also I'm not glad I had cancer. I don't wish it on anyone, but I am better for it. So I think that the idea of talking about something takes the curse off it. And I did the same thing. I was a victim of a violent crime too. And it's like, if you keep it bottled up inside, and I did for a while, quite frankly. And I think that's what gave me the gynecologic cancer, because I was raped at gunpoint by a man who was on parole, who I didn't even know, and broke into my house. And so, I kind of learned the hard way that that's not the way, just kind of sweeping it under the rug, getting on with your life, kind of making believe that you're okay when really you're not okay, when really you're not dealing with your pain, when you're not asking for help, when you're not allowing yourself to be vulnerable, is not healthy, because that goes somewhere in the system. And it's almost poetic that I was raped at gunpoint and then end up with a gynecologic cancer.
Thank you for sharing that. You were a diplomatic envoy, though, for women's health issues in D.C.
I was.
Can you tell us a little bit about what you accomplished?
Well, I had heard about, actually through my oncologist, that there was a bill in Washington that was sort of fast going nowhere. And it was called Johanna's Law in the House of Representatives. And it was laying like, nowhere in the Senate. And in the Senate, it was called the Gynecologic Cancer Education and Awareness Act, which was the first of its kind in U.S. history. So I went down there and started, using my celebrity to knock on doors of our elected officials and conjure up some excitement for this bill. And it was a different time then. It was during the Bush administration, and Ted Kennedy was, the party that was the Democrats were the dominant party in the Senate, and we ended up, I worked my ass off to get everybody to get on the same page, and I was very lucky. I had a lot of cooperation. I remember I ran into Barack Obama, who was a young senator, in the hallway, not even knowing that his mother died of a female gynecologic cancer. And I asked him to co-sign the bill, and he did, and Hillary Clinton did. But everybody, at the end of the day, voted yes, Fran, for it. And I was written up twice in the congressional record by very conservative Republicans. And then it was the Bush administration that offered me the vetted position of public diplomacy envoy, and I was able to, which I, graciously accepted, and then I ended up being sent to many of our allied nations as well as military bases, talking about health, the things that I talk about as the founder of Cancer Schmancer. But when you're representative of the the U.S. government, you really aren't there as a private person with a nonprofit. It was just me representing the U.S., but talking my talk. And it was a very thrilling experience.
That sounds amazing. And now you're doing summit events, you're doing a master class. Does that make you a professor?
No, makes me an excellent curator of professors. There's a lot of doctors out there that went to medical school, started practicing, drank the Kool-Aid, and then began to think there's got to be a better way. And so they are the pioneers of a new shift in the way we think about medicine, and it's much more causation-based, and it's much more looking at the whole body as a system, not just the part that appears to be broken, which is a style of medicine that comes out of war medicine. It's also like emergency room medicine. Sure, you get shot on the battlefield. You got to go right to, be very site-specific. But when you have a chronic disease or even a cancer, you have to do a lot more than that. And this is where I feel like, the current Western medicine tends to fall short. These doctors are thinking from a whole different portal, and it's what I and Cancer Schmancer believe is exactly what we all need to be thinking about. If you had an apple tree that was yielding rotten apples, you wouldn't go and try and fix every single apple on the tree. What you would do is look at the trunk of the tree, look at the roots of the tree, try and figure out why the tree is sick. What's making the tree sick? You're not going to go and try and fix every single apple. That's crazy. But that's basically what we do when we think about any disease that we have, but especially cancer. We just look at the sick part, and that's the end symptom. So there's so many other things that we have to look at. Just to look at hospital food is to know that current Western medicine is not thinking at all that food is medicine and medicine is food. Something that, they figured out in ancient Greece. So, civilizations forget things. They go into dark ages. Then they get this big, kind of Western ego that we know best, and we don't have to look at indigenous cultures. We don't have to look at Asian wisdom. We don't have to understand how food is medicine, or how a sick planet is a sick species, or how, how we live if we balance mind, body, and spirit. That's the only way to keep a healthy immune system. And what is compromising our immune system? Everything. Honestly, just walking in this building, I'm looking at all the closed windows, all the electronics, all the, fluorescent lighting, all of the industrial fabrics everywhere. And I'm thinking the off-gassing in this building, I'm glad I'm only here for 10 minutes. But there are people that work here every single day, and they're not even thinking about that. And we went into that green room, and I saw it looked like one of the windows would have opened. And all I was thinking about was, if I worked there, I would make them open those windows. I don't care how cold it is, because, you got to get some movement. Otherwise, all we're doing is breathing in air from some kind. I don't know what's in the system of these buildings, spores. So, the more we can ground ourselves, I have like a grounding mat on my bed that plugs into that 3-pronged thing in the wall, that 3rd prong. That's grounding you into the earth. The earth's energy is what we need. Dirt we need. Children that grow up in a home with no pets have the most earaches. And then if you have a dog or a cat that's going in and out of the backyard all day and playing on the carpet with a toddler, they have much less earaches. And then if you have a kid that's out in the yard all day, they hardly get any earaches because they're touching the soil, they're putting it in their mouth, they're connecting with the earth. They have the healthiest microbiome.
So if you could leave everyone with sort of some to-dos, whether that's partnering with your doctors, detoxing your home, eating healthy, being an advocate, getting screened, what are the things you think, and you've talked to young people as well, what are the things that you want us to be doing?
Well, definitely go to cancerschmancer.org, because then you'll have a direct connection to me and everything that we're doing. We're a radical company, make no mistake about it. We're the only nonprofit that's singing this song. And we align ourselves much more with environmental groups than other health nonprofits, because they're still looking for the next big chemo. And it's like, what? No, that's not the answer. We have to pivot our thinking completely. So go to cancerschmancer.org for sure and sign up. Then we do an annual Masterclass Health Summit. I curate it all year long. Find the most cutting edge, mind-blowing doctors that tell you things that you are never going to hear anywhere else. And and they speak annually at our health summit. It's held in Los Angeles at the Dorothy Chandler, but it's live streamed for free around the world. So if you join Cancer Schmancer, you'll know about it, and you'll be able to log on to it. And then that gets chopped up into what we call an edu-series, and that ran all of the month of December for free. And every day, another 2 doctors and myself. I speak. I moderate. You know, I do one-on-one interviews, and it's just an extremely exhilarating and informative experience. And now it's currently available for a nominal donation as a downloadable for your video library. And it's such a wealth of information. It's so dense with knowledge that you do want to download it, because even myself, every time I watch it, I learn something else, and it makes me so proud, because when I'm working the event, I'm looking at, you know, my notes, so I know who the next guest is and what I'm going to say to them, and I'm thinking about a lot of different things, and I don't really get a chance to enjoy the talks as much as when I'm at home watching it on my computer, laying in bed, and it really blows my mind. I mean, and we never stop learning. I may know more than some people, but there is an endless amount of things that we continue to learn, because we happen to be living in extremely toxic times. So very simple things. I mean, look at your toothpaste. If that toothpaste, it doesn't have ingredients that might have grown in your grandma's garden, if anywhere on the packaging it says do not swallow or call poison control, throw it away. You should not be putting that in your mouth 1, 2, 3 times a day. The gums are the gateway to dis-ease. So you should be having very, very pure, natural, organic, eco-friendly things that you put in your mouth to stay clean and fresh, and mouthwash and all of that. So oral hygiene, you know, whatever you're doing, you can't possibly be doing enough. I can't tell you how fanatical I've become about it, from the water pick to the special mouth rinse to, you know, the, what do you call it?
Floss.
Yes, flossing and brushing and using the right toothpaste and all of that, and brushing the tongue, they said, is really good. All of that is very important. There's a lot of time you have to spend to be, you know, in good shape. I take a lot of and vitamins too, actually. Whatever we think we're supposed to take, we really need to take a lot more than that. And people are always asking me, well, what about, you know, do you take the flu vaccine? And it's like, no, I don't. I work on keeping my immune system as powerful as possible. There is nothing better than the immune system. And anything you take, from an antibiotic to any kind of vaccine, is compromising the strength of the immune system. So if you can come at it through that portal and really amp up on your antioxidants, reduce your stress, protect yourself from, you know, toxic environments, you're really helping yourself to stay well.
And alive forever, right?
Well, you know, that reminds me of that Woody Allen movie, Sleeper. And he said, you know, where are all my friends? And they said, it's 200 years later, they're all dead. And he said, but they all ate brown rice. So, you know, we're not going to live forever, but I don't think that the idea that when you grow old, you get all of these chronic illnesses, that people are getting very used to thinking they have to take 20 prescriptive pills a day to prevent all kinds of issues, is normal. It isn't normal. And, you know, the more you do right now to grow old gracefully and healthfully, to stay strong in your body, the better off you are. There's no downside.
Great. We're going to transition a little bit to Indebted, which is premiering on February 6th. So I know you said you've gone from nanny to granny. Can we expect sort of your similar brand of comedy?
Oh, for sure. I mean, when I do TV, my fandom has come to expect a certain something from me, and I am more than delighted to give it to them. And in fact, you know, when I started doing this, Dan Levy, who created it, was inspired by his own parents, and then he started thinking about, like, Everybody Loves Raymond, and I said to him, that's not me. I'm not that mother on Everybody Loved Raymond. I don't want to have an antagonistic relationship with my daughter-in-law. It's not what I'm about. I want to be vivacious. I want to be fun-loving. I want to dress, well, and that's me. And it all comes through this. So it's going to be basically that.
I love that.
It's like the nanny, if, who the nanny would be today. I mean, she's totally into clothes. She's a clothesaholic. She doesn't really, she's clueless when it comes to saving money. And she's a lot of fun, really immature, but a heart of gold, so that's it.
Do you know the Instagram account, What Fran Wore?
Duh.
Uh-huh. It's a good one.
I know everything.
It's a good one.
There's also an Instagram account called Nanny Art, and they compare the clothes with fine art, which is right up my alley because I'm an art collector.
Oh. What is contemporary and fresh about this sitcom?
Well, I think, for one, how the older couple is being described. I mean, we are not your typical annoying, obnoxious, negative intruders. We're actually madly in love with each other, extremely tactile and sexy and sexual and all of that. And I think that that's sort of refreshing. And also it's a little bit of a role reversal because it's questionable who really are the parents, because we're so nutty, me and my husband, me and Stephen Weber in this, and so lighthearted and so fun-loving that it ends up being my son that becomes more of the parent, and we're more like the adolescents.
What is different about doing a sitcom today than in the 90s with so much content out there, and you made a classic? So how do you do that today?
Well, I think that, the origins of what makes a show pleasing to an audience at home, it has not changed. I mean, you got to have laugh out loud comedy, and I think you have to believe the relationships, and the jokes have to come from character, and I think that rooted deep at the core, there's got to be a lot of love, and that's the same. To me, I don't see any difference. The audiences that come, the warm-up guy, all of that feels exactly the same. I'm sure that when it comes to the numbers, the slices of pie are much smaller because there are many more slices. But this isn't, my first rodeo. I mean, I've been doing, it's been, this is network TV, so if anything, you probably have a better piece of the pie than being on some of these cable networks. And my parents could never find Happily Divorced on cable. And all of their friends, it was the bane of their existence. Nobody could find the show. So, I'm very happy to be on the Peacock network because all my parents' friends will be able to find it now. And that's really comforting to me. Last night, I was on Seth Meyers last night, and I actually fell asleep before it was on, but I knew that it was going to be I had it on the DVR, but it was such a big day, and I had such an early call today that I just let myself, drift off. Well, at like 10 minutes to 1, the phone rang, and I answered it. Who is this? I changed my voice when I answered my phone. And Mom said, "It's Mom, you were wonderful. Daddy said this was a great interview." So, of course, then I'm like thinking, well, let me see it. Then I'm watching it at 1 in the morning, seeing it on the DVR. But, the thing is, it's the whole machine feels the same. There's a lot more interviews to do. Mm-hmm. I mean, between social media and cable stuff and live stream stuff and YouTube stuff and, it's just, and all of regular TV, it's just endless the amount of things you can do in terms of trying to self-promote. but we'll see how much it pays off. I hope people come on Thursday night, and I hope that they enjoy it as much as we enjoy making it.
How would you feel if your parents moved in with you?
I have asked them to move in with me. I would love them to move in with me. They don't want to.
Oh.
I'm trying to get them to move like 10 minutes away from me. But that even is a struggle. They're very happy with each other in South Florida. And it's just annoying because it's hard for me. But I'm so grateful for FaceTime, I can't even tell you. Because we FaceTime every day. So we're either all in bed together or we're all in the kitchen eating together. But it really is a blessing. I'm just so grateful that we live in a time where even though we're 3,000 miles away, I can see them every day. But I do feel like, you know, if you're going to live into your 90s, my mom's in her 80s, my dad just turned 90, you know, God willing, I'm going to have them for several more years at least. You need help. You need that. I mean, I don't know who the hell's going to take care of me because I don't have children, but if you are lucky enough to, oh, thank you. Can we get that in writing, please? I know, Peter and I always say, you know, what's going to happen to us? We have to save our shekels so we can pay people to take care of us.
You have a nice relationship with him.
Yes, I love my gay ex-husband. And, you know, we're best of friends. We're still writing partners. We're certainly writing together the Nanny musical. And thank you. And we just handed the book over to Rachel Bloom, who's did Crazy Ex-Girlfriend and won the Emmy for that. And so we're very excited about it. But now he's doing a Netflix show. And I'm doing, of course, Indebted on NBC. Right. So we do things apart, we do things together. But we always talk to each other every single day, usually FaceTime. And we actually vacation together, too. I mean, he's a total cockblock for me. I don't care.
I'm going to open it up to questions now. But okay. While we do that, so feel free to line up at the mics. Is it hard? You've done several sitcoms, great sitcoms that you've been involved with in all different levels. Is it hard to find the rhythm when you're doing a new show? Like, is it hard to get the cast all to sort of feel the energy? You've done this so many times. What's that like?
You know, I feel like I'm the cheerleader, and I'm a nurturer by nature anyway. Yeah. So I kind of forced us to become very connected very quickly, off camera. Yep. Very tactile. Let's, you know, eat together. I made chopped liver. I brought it in. Everybody come into my dressing room, you know, and we just started getting it together very quickly. And, you know, I remember the first time we had an eating scene around the dining room, and nobody was really eating, and it was like, cut. We gotta be eating and talking and connecting and, you know, being real. Because for me, my brand of comedy is, you know, that the specificity of it is what helps bring it to life on the small screen. And, you know, it's those edges. Are we really doing stuff in the kitchen? Are we really eating? Am I really hugging you? Am I really touching you when you're talking to me? I don't have to be, you know, touching you, but I do. And you have to do the same. And so, you know, we all kind of, because we all wanted it to work, and there is a certain level of trust. I'm like the, you know, the senior in the group that they, in terms of my wealth of experience, but also I'm the oldest one in the cast. I'm older than everyone all of a sudden. I don't really know how that happened. I don't feel it. But anyway, you know, they're all really respectful of me. And usually if I say something, they see that, okay, you know, she's right. So let's just dive in the deep end and start behaving like a family, and then we'll become one. And we have, and we totally adore each other. And we have like a text thread that we're all on. And we get these little bursts every like couple of days where everybody starts talking on it and saying lame jokes and putting emojis on and talking about what's happening and sending pictures and, you know, clips of talk shows or whatever. And so, you know, we're actually a very loving group. And me and Adam Paley, who plays my son, you know, he lost his mother at a very young age. I never had children, so, you know, I didn't have a son, he doesn't have a mother. And so we did actually bond, and we do adore each other. And I'm very grateful because he was the first one cast in the show, and NBC was very high on him. And, you know, he's a very generous actor because you know, I came in with my big self, and NBC is like pushing me, and he's cool with all of it.
Well, Happy Endings was an amazing show.
I know, he's wildly talented.
Yeah.
And you know, I mean, no one's seen the show really. So they're going for the one that the people that watch network TV probably knows the best.
Right, well, the Nanny's been on nonstop for 25 years, is that right?
Yeah, well, 1993.
The Bushmen in Africa know you.
Yeah, exactly. The Bushmen in Africa. I know. That was when I was like, wow. I mean, everybody sees this show. And, you know, I travel a lot, and people are always telling me that they, you know, learn to speak English watching The Nanny. So now there's people in Russia and Hong Kong and Argentina that are all speaking English and ironically sound like me.
No questions? I don't see. Oh, we have a question. Great.
Kind of a combo question and comment. I wanted to say thank you for coming in, and I also wanted to say thanks to the Toxic Google people for arranging this. I actually just lost my brother a month ago to a brain tumor.
Oh, no.
3 years old. And he and I watched your show every day for probably a decade or more. And we watched it even when he was very ill and he just wanted things in the background, and we watched it on the reruns all the time. So it was a really amazing moment because I had forgotten that until I saw this email come up that Fran was coming today, and I was like, oh my God. I just want to say thank you. So my next question is going to be for you, and what was your favorite episode to shoot? Because Charlie and I watched every single one. So.
Okay, well, first of all, my deepest condolences. That's a tragic and profound loss, and I'm very, very sorry. And I hear that a lot, by the way, from people that say that, you know, that moment when we could watch The Nanny in the hospital room or something and we can all laugh together was the only time that kind of lifted us out of the depths of despair. And, you know, in hearing that, it's been a great gift for me because maybe there was a time when I was doing The Nanny where I didn't quite appreciate its value. That, you know, you don't have to be Meryl Streep. You don't have to win Oscars to make a contribution artistically to the world. But if you can make people laugh and lift their spirits, I really was able to appreciate my gift on a whole nother level. So thank you for sharing that. And I guess, what was my favorite episode on The Nanny? There were so many good ones, honestly. I mean, and we had so many good guest stars on the show, too. But I think, you know, one of the earlier episodes, the first time that Mr. Sheffield and I connected in a way that broke down the barrier a little bit of the employee and the employer was an episode called I Remember Mama, where the two older kids could remember the deceased mom, but the youngest one could not. And ultimately, we found the video where they were all together and the mom was still alive. And the little girl in that moment, when everybody was watching it, she said, I remember. And Mr. Sheffield was sitting there, and I was standing behind him. And, he was it was such a bittersweet moment. He was so forlorn and so saddened. And I just put my hand on his shoulder as a friend would. And that was it. But that changed everything because we moved in a direction of depth of feeling of these two people. And so we were able to keep going in that direction. And for me, always, when you do a sitcom, you make people laugh, but you can also pull on their heartstrings. That's power.
Yes.
That's power.
It certainly is. Any other questions? Oh, Mike.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you so much for coming and lots of love from India. I actually grew up in the 90s, vaguely remembering when my colleague mentioned that you were coming, I was like, oh my God, the hair. Because my mom was really inspired she had a lot of hair like yours. And she's really she's actually close in age to you. And she was in Jersey for the last 5 years.
What is that, 50? Yes. She says yes.
She and my dad just retired and moved back to India, and they're now in a whole new place again. And I was just wondering, mostly for them, how do you feel? What should I say to them best for this new phase in their life? Because he's gone from being a workaholic to suddenly having all this time.
Oh, that's great.
And my mother is not happy.
Oh, because he's always home.
Because yes.
Yeah, men have to have something to do or they're pains in the asses. Speaking of which, my second husband was Indian.
Oh.
Yeah, he was from Chennai.
Oh, wow. I'm from Kolkata.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and when we were married, I was doing a lot of Indian cooking, and I have a curry tree in my backyard because he said, no Indian home can be without a curry tree. And when we got married, I wore red, and we were both barefoot, and he wore white, and
The garland exchange.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
And I had and we had a Hindu priest marry us, as well as a gay Jewish minister, of course. But I would just say, every stage in life seems to offer us opportunities to grow and see the world through a different lens. And I'm very productive, and I definitely suggest that for your parents, certainly your dad. I mean, I think whether it be volunteering or writing or starting your own nonprofit or just helping be a tutor or a friend to a kid that needs it, I had a boyfriend whose dad was retired and didn't know what to do with himself, and he started working. He loved dogs, so he started working at this dog shelter, and he would walk them and love them, and it gave his life so much meaning. He fell in love with all the dogs, and he had a real purpose to his life. So I think that to have purpose is really important as one gets older, and then to learn things, because the brain is always wanting to learn. And if you stop learning and you just do what's easy and comfortable, then the brain's going to atrophy, and that's when kind of dementia. So challenge yourself. Even with my parents, who are much older, or old enough to be your grandparents, I got them both the iPhone. And it's like, of course they get frustrated. Who doesn't get frustrated sometimes by your iPhone? But I keep telling them this is brain food. So just think of it as, every time you conquer a problem with your iPhone or have to learn it again because they've changed it or updated it, you're, creating more healthy brain cells. And that's what's important.
Thank you. Also, this is the coolest birthday I've ever had.
Oh, happy birthday. Happy birthday.
The mics are open, but I have plenty of questions. Oh.
Hi. I wanted to echo what everybody said, and thank you for being here. Also grew up on the Nanny. Was very excited when I saw the email come through. So going back to your Cancer Schmancer campaign, it seems like some of the key components include informing ourselves and making better decisions based off that information. But I think as a consumer, one of the key problems that I encounter is where to get my information. It seems like you've done a lot of the legwork for us, but outside of Cancer Schmancer, where can we start with making informed decisions, especially in the context of, I would say, fake news maybe, or false information? There's so much out there. I don't know where to start.
You know, here's the thing. We have an innate wisdom that we've been dumbed down and numbed out from. And that's by design, because they want all of us to think that they know better, that we can't be healthy without buying a pill, and we're not contemporary, or we're not modern, or we're not happening if we don't use this product or that. So I would say that, you know, start reconnecting to your innate wisdom. Everything old is new again. Shiva, my second husband, used to say, in business they say kiss it, which is keep it simple, stupid. And that's what it all boils down to. Keep it simple, stupid. It's like dial it back. You know, look at indigenous cultures. Look at Eastern cultures. I'll give you an example. And, you know, it's just such obvious stuff. Don't, you know, stop using plastic. Like, cut back on your plastic intake. We are being buried alive in plastic, and there are people, they're drinking from their single-use plastic water bottle, bitching about global warming. And it's like, what the hell do you think that's made of? Petroleum. We're driving this. We are, with mindless consumerism. So go back to natural things, you know, glass and cartons. And, you know, do I like liquid dishwashing detergent better than powder? Yeah, but I'm not going to get those heavy plastic bottles anymore. So I get an eco-friendly powder in a box. And you know what? I feel really good about myself. Nothing has to be industrial strength. It's bullshit. And what happens is chemical companies invent these chemicals for war. And then when the war is over, they think, well, we're not done selling this. Let's repurpose it onto civilian life and convince them that they need this chemical to kill their garden weeds and kill, by the way, everything in the microbiome, including going down into the watershed. It's like, that's got to stop. Somebody once said to me, well, how do you kill the weeds? And I said, if you don't like your weeds, which also is bullshit, weeds are sturdy and they flower and they're beautiful. But if you have to pull out a perfectly good living plant because it's called a weed, which, by the way, cannabis is one of the great things that has ever been on this planet, get down on your hands and knees, connect with nature, and pull it out. So go back to basics. Eat whole food. Look for organic, eco-friendly products. That's half the battle. Read labels. If it has chemicals, you know, words listed that you don't understand, you don't need it. Keep it simple, stupid. Listen to your inner self. That's closest to your creator. Forget about all the noise out there. You can't trust any of them. It's mostly greed-driven. Even the FDA, what the hell do they do? They're beholden to big business that supports our elected officials. It's a hamster wheel that you have to jump off of immediately and start dictating more responsible manufacturing trends. Make what you buy your vote as well as your protest.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Hi, my name is Priya, and I'm so excited to see you here.
Oh, thank you.
I used to watch you all the time, and I too recently lost a friend to cancer. Just back in October. She's only 44, and she actually loved you too. So I've been thinking a lot about cancer and health in general, and my background prior to coming to Google has been completely in healthcare. I grew up with doctors all around me, my family, friends, all physicians, and I've been working in pharma, and now I'm working in the ad space, YouTube. bringing tech and healthcare together. I've actually also worked in big oil. Tobacco, but I'm not going to. So my question for you is, I love everything that you're doing, and I love everything that is out there right now in terms of empowering people to talk to physicians and have effective dialogue and empower themselves from all perspectives. I grew up with Ayurveda in the house and big fan of allopathic medicine, naturopathic. How do you envision rolling your message out to people who are not only educated New Yorkers? I live in Brooklyn. Sometimes I walk around and I'm like, everyone's like me. No, they're not. When I travel to other places in the United States, there's different mindsets. So how would you take your message and talk to somebody who maybe doesn't believe in the same things that you believe in? Like, how would you kind of get them there?
Okay, well, I know that I'm here in New York right now talking to you guys, but I really do have a much broader reach. And the Nanny has been partly responsible for that. I have a widely diverse fandom. When we started that show, they thought the show was going to be huge in LA and New York, when in fact those were slow on the take because they were still watching Unsolved Mysteries until people got hip to the fact that there was no end to those shows. And it was the Sun Belt and the Midwest that actually embraced the show very enthusiastically first. So for me, poor health is the great equalizer. I don't care what your politics is. I don't care what you think on this subject or that subject. And this is why I'm successful in Washington, because I can be face to face with somebody that I have 99% nothing in common with, but I can ask them if they've lost anybody to cancer or if they themselves have had cancer, and then we start a conversation. And once we're on that level, then we're equals and we're talking about something that's real. And with people, whether they be, I'm very compassionate to people that are in some of these areas where it's very hard to get healthy food. But I do see that the more people start talking about it, the more there tends to be farmers markets coming into neighborhoods where you never used to see that before. But this is all a cultural shift. So it only takes 10% of a population to change a paradigm. And it may take the people from places like this to start saying, we're not going to support industrial farms anymore. In fact, industrial farms should be put out of business completely, because nobody should be eating industrial farmed animals. And maybe we need to start encouraging people to grow their own fruits and vegetables if they have a patch of land or a community patch of land. And again, this kind of goes back to dialing it back to another time. I don't think that people really realize that not that long ago, maybe just 100 years ago, or less, you wouldn't have thrown out a cigar box without turning it into a sewing box. We were not a throwaway society. We had to learn how to do that. We had to be brainwashed into thinking that was modern and that was contemporary, and it's completely unsustainable. But during the mid-20th century, it was the vending machine that got invented. And suddenly you can stand in your hallway at work and have a hot cup of coffee. But the problem was people didn't know what to do with the cup. It was a perfectly good cup. You could reuse it many times. What do we do with it now? And then they had to start making PSAs that they'd run in movie theaters to teach you how modern you are to throw it out. And suddenly there was a trash receptacle next to every vending machine, everywhere there was a vending machine. And suddenly we were reprogrammed into thinking, this is great, throw it away. So, we're not that far from our recent past when people were much more connected. These are our grandparents and great-grandparents, and that's what we have to look to. And indigenous cultures, it exists right now. I would rather personally have organic, rice and beans and vegetables 6 days a week and then have an organic chicken on the 7th day than eat crappy industrial farmed meat every night of the week and, highly acidic corn sweetened soda, from 7-Eleven. And that's the messaging that we have to get out to people. And I think that I've seen groups that are teaching people, especially, in inner cities. Women, I think, are the backbone of any community. And unfortunately, they bear the brunt of a lot of dis-ease in their body because they tend to put the family first. They not only work, but then are the caregiver to the child, the spouse, and the elder in almost every home worldwide. It's a lot. And when they feel something wrong, they very often don't take care of themselves right away. But going into the inner cities, and we do this at Cancer Schmancer, because I already have a conversation going with them. They're my fans. So there's a trusted brand in me. And I use it to try and get women to realize that, you are not helping your family if you're 6 feet under. So when you feel something that's not right, that's the time to go check it out, because you have to take care of yourself first, so that you can have a long and healthy life and take care of your family. So it's a big question and it's a big problem. And you sound like you've been working a lot for people that are part of the problem. So but that's okay. If that is working for you. That doesn't mean that you still can't join Cancer Schmancer. You have a private life, and if you want to try and dip into the other side, take your wealth, take your ambition, and take, all of your know-how and move over to the other side and start helping us help all these people. Do it. You can do that. That's okay, without judgment.
Well,
I appreciate the honesty, and things are coming full circle.
Thank you so much for being here. Everybody, sign up at cancerschmancer.org. Watch Indebted on NBC on Thursdays, and look out for the Nanny musical coming soon to Broadway.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.